Good morning to all of you. I'm glad to address you today. And despite the very hectic schedule in the Senate, I thought that I would be with you today since your subject matter is something very close to my heart. I have a very long speech, but I would like to just read parts of it and speak from the heart. Because as I speak, there are more than 96,000 families in need of food, clothing, basic shelter in Mindanao, as you know, caused by Typhoon Pablo. As I speak, millions of people don't know how Christmas would be this year and in the coming years. As I speak, victims of Typhoon Sendong a year ago in Cagayan de Oro and Iligan still live in makeshift and evacuation centers. And as I speak, those who were victimized by Ondoy in 2009 have not completely recovered from their devastation of 2009. Now, just allow me to give some basic information about ASEAN. We know that the population of our member countries, as of 2011, is pegged at 598 million more or less, if this is accurate. And this high population, combined with the diversity of cultures and our vast natural resources, makes for a region of immense potential. But as we know, many challenges face us every day. Most ASEAN countries are either on the Pacific Ring of Fire or the Typhoon Belt, as we all know. And the Philippines is victim to at least 20 natural hazards every year. Natural hazards which I think should not turn into disasters if we are sufficiently prepared. In fact, some of the most devastating disasters have occurred in our region. And I'm referring to the earthquake of 2004, the floods in Bangkok a year or two ago, the Habagat in Metro Manila, Ondoy, as I mentioned, Sendong, Pablo now, and many others. I therefore laud the SEAMEO INNOTECH for this initiative of focusing on a green Southeast Asia during this 13th International Conference. Your thrust of facilitating, teaching, and learning through innovative and technology-based research and training solutions in order to fully develop the potentials of the people of Southeast Asia is already an immense contribution towards environmental solutions for our region. That is not an original statement, that is a quote. I believe that concerted efforts from all sectors is the only way we will be able to achieve sustainable development. If not, there will be devastating consequences. A recent study by the Asian Development Bank called the key indicators for Asia and the Pacific show that the fast rate of urbanization in Asia has been causing environmental degradation, with a rise in pollution. And when I speak of pollution, I'm referring not only to the particulates in the air that we breathe, but also in the pollution of our rivers and bays and waters brought about by non-implementation of laws, including our Clean Water Act, and also greater economic and social inequalities brought about by the drivers of vulnerability. Let me digress a little. What are the drivers of vulnerability which affect us in Metro Manila, in urban areas in the Philippines, and most ASEAN cities? Ecosystems decline, or the way we abuse our natural resources and the concomitant degradation of these resources. The way our forests are denuded, the way we throw solid waste into our rivers, and therefore our ecosystems are degraded. Vulnerable rural livelihoods, weaving and indigenous crafts are affected. Rural livelihoods like farming and fishing are affected because of the way we abuse our ecosystems. And third, ineffective governance, where building codes local ordinances, and implementation of national laws are not followed. We only need to take a cursory look around us to see that the 4 degrees Celsius world, which may have seemed impossible 20 years ago, is not far off today. Again, I quote, the World Bank warns that we are in fact nearing a crisis that, if not responded to proactively, will continue to endanger the survival of this and the next generation. In fact, what does a 4 degrees Celsius rise mean in global temperature? This would likely happen if nations would not comply with their commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A warmer climate would increase sea level by up to 3 feet, and that's probably the height, or perhaps more, of this podium. It would cause flooding in many coastal cities. Dry regions would become drier, wet regions will be wetter, and we experienced that. You will recall that many Christmases back, who would have ever imagined that we would have faced a Sen in Mindanao or a Pablo in Mindanao? Who would have ever imagined that all of these things would happen 5 or 10 years ago? Because during the time, we knew the dry season and we knew the wet season. We had 2 weathers, tag-ulan at tag-araw. But now, definitely, our times and our climes have changed. It is important to realize that the changing climate will have its worst effects on the poor, and this is where the climate injustice lies. The poor, who have nothing to do at all with the emission of greenhouse gases, the poor whose livelihoods are most vulnerable, the poor who have been deprived of basic needs and necessities like shelter, housing, clothing, and basic food and potable water, are the biggest and the most vulnerable communities through the changes of climate. And we see that in Mindanao, we've seen that in Typhoon Frank in the Visayas in 2008, we've seen that in Typhoon Winnie in November, December of 2004, in Quezon and in Aurora. We've seen that in Pablo now in Mindanao. This is why disseminating information and creating awareness about environmental conservation and sustainable development has never been as vital as it is today. In fact, today, at 2 o'clock, I will speak to the head of the Mines and Geosciences Bureau and the Secretary of Environment, who will come to the Senate, where we will brief the media and the LMP, or the League of Mayors, Municipalities of the Philippines, on the utilization of our geohazard maps. Because I sincerely believe that if we take to heart the importance of this multi-hazard and geohazard maps, hazards don't necessarily have turned into disasters if we do not build our homes, our schools, our health centers, our structures in vulnerable areas, which are. Now, due to changes in temperature, rainfall, and sea level, crop yield is estimated to decline by 19% in Asia towards the end of a century, and rice yield by about 75%. And this is not my imagination or a made-up fact. This is a quote from the World Bank. A 2 to 4 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature, believe it or not, will probably cause the possible extinction of 30% of all flora and fauna, and will also result to a possible 3% decline in GDP. In our country, I'm happy to tell you, and perhaps the ASEAN members present here today, it could also be instructional. We have the best legislation. I'm proud to say that I authored the Climate Change Act in 2009, which created the National Commission on Climate Change. We created the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act, and we were able to create the commissions and the councils born out of those two legislative measures. The President himself is the chairman of the Commission on Climate Change, and the NDREAMC Council is chaired by the SFD, or the Secretary of National Defense. But you ask, why are there still disasters? It is because there is a big gap between a well-crafted law and the implementation and funding of these measures. And that is a challenge for us legislators to make sure that our laws work. I also authored a recently enacted law along with the Senate President called the People's Survival Fund, which is a funding component of the climate change law. As you see, we have the best laws, even lauded by the United Nations ISDR. The Climate Change Act, the NDREAMC law, People's Survival Fund law, and in my first term, RA 9003, the Solid Waste Management Law, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Environmental Education Awareness Act. But there is a big gap between a well-crafted, well-thought-of law and the implementation of these laws. But I remain undaunted, and in my last and final term, come 2013 till 2019, I will focus on not only funding these laws, but making sure these laws work by giving DRR workshops, not only in every region, which I started last year with the late Secretary Robredo through the Local Government Academy, but I will go down to the provincial, city, municipal, and barangay level, and perhaps even expand it to the corporate, people's organization, and NGO sector, so that everyone believes, understands, and implements what it means to have a disaster-resilient and a climate-adaptive economy. Beyond these laws, the world must act more swiftly, more wisely, more decisively to build resilience to disasters. Southeast Asia, as a vulnerable region, should take the lead in climate negotiations recently held in Doha. Reducing disaster risks is a matter of high importance to the world now, especially to developing countries where disaster risks abound, and to the poor and the marginalized who are most affected by natural hazards. Again, we must make bold and creative solutions to our problems. We must enlist the help of all those we can reach out to, and we must combine the power of information technology with our message of environmental conservation and sustainable development. I think that now is a time to redefine development, to change our way of thinking, our way of doing, and to give nothing less than our wholehearted commitment to a safer, more resilient human society. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before you today. And I urge all of you present here, whether you are from the Philippines, from our neighboring ASEAN nations, whether you are in an NGO or in the corporate sector or in media, whether you are a senior citizen or a youth leader or a businessman or a working person, it is important that we take to heart the importance of the Philippines' vulnerability and to make sure that we understand and we implement our laws in the respective fields where we exercise our careers. And let us do our share in saving our environment by implementing the solid waste management law through the segregation of garbage at source, recycling, and composting, by implementing the Clean Water Act to make sure that our waterways are not used as sewage systems of cities, municipalities, etc. To make sure that our clean air that we should demand from government is clean enough for us to breathe. And to make sure that geohazard maps, whether in highly urbanized areas like Metro Manila or in rural communities like New Bataan and Compostela Valley, are actually implemented. I can go on and on, but I have limited time, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to at least to taunt your imagination today, to make sure that we actually embrace green and sustainable living, and to reassess and redefine the kind of development that we've actually been measuring our progress with. We claim and we are proud to have a 6.1% growth rate. We are on when we are nearing a double-digit growth statistics, but really, has this growth and progress permeated to the poorest of the poor? Has it improved the life of the most vulnerable communities, meaning the rural women and children, the farmers and the fisher folks? Has it actually improved the lives of our 15 million indigenous people? If the answer is no, then it is time to reassess and to redefine development into a quality of life where we would see the Philippines to be cleaner, greener, and bluer. Maraming salamat po, isang luntiang araw sa ating lahat.